Hi guys, and welcome to this lecture on the research into well-being. Since mindfulness is interconnected to well-being and the early years learning framework was developed with a child's well-being in mind, it's important to have a good understanding of what the research into well-being has found. And I'm sure you will at least be a little shocked with the statistics I'm about to show you. I think it's really important to be aware of what's actually happening at the moment so we can conceptualize how important it is that we acknowledge the state of people's well-being in Australia and across other nations in order to commit to making the necessary changes. The research I'm about to present to you can be a little bit heavy in terms of discussing measurement frameworks and percentages. However, this is because this research is the real deal. It's not something I found from a newspaper clipping or a Google search. It comes from actual documents it was presented on. And I have presented it to you in a way in order for its legitimacy to be clearly evident and profoundly shocking. Okay, firstly, let's have a look at the state of well-being across nations. Historically, governments only measured a country's success via their financial growth. However, governments around the world are now recognizing that the level of well-being within a population is a very good indicator of the country's progress. As such, measuring subjective well-being across nations is becoming a more accurate science. And one of the best studies came from Hubert and So in 2013 after they devised a framework for measuring well-being by considering well-being to be at the opposite end of the spectrum of common mental disorders such as depression and anxiety. That is, their measuring framework equates high well-being with positive mental health. Subsequently, in order to obtain an internationally agreed criteria for depression and anxiety, they examined the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders, or the DMS, and the International Classification of Diseases, or the ICD, and then determined the opposite of each mental disorder symptom and subsequently identified 10 features of positive well-being, which included competence, emotional stability, engagement, meaning, optimism, positive emotion, positive relationships, resilience, self-esteem, and vitality. Their framework included both hedonic and eudaimonic aspects of well-being and determined that flourishing meant that an individual must experience 5 core features, these being positive emotions, engagement, interest, meaning, and purpose. Moreover, individuals must also have at least 3 of the following features: self-esteem, optimism, resilience, vitality, self-determination, and positive relationships. After developing an operational definition of flourishing, Hubert and So measured well-being by applying a psychometric analysis of indicators to the 10 criteria, the ones I've mentioned: competence, emotional stability, engagement, meaning, etc., and used data from a representative sample of 43,000 European adults. And these 43,000 participants came from 23 different European countries. Their studies showed that the Danish citizens had the highest level of well-being or flourishing across all of the 23 European countries that were investigated. However, only 40.6% of Danish citizens were actually flourishing, meaning over half the population had measures of low well-being, which equated to experiencing some kind of mental health issue, such as depression or anxiety. Okay, so that means around 60% of the population of Denmark are suffering from depression or anxiety or some other mental illness. And this is really quite alarming when you consider this was the country at the top of the list. In comparison, levels of flourishing were drastically reduced in the other countries, with results indicating the second highest level of flourishing was amongst the Swiss citizens. However, only 30.2% of them were actually flourishing, meaning around 70% of the Swiss population had low levels of well-being or suffering from depression and or anxiety or some other type of mental illness. And remember, these are the high-scoring countries where life is supposed to be good. Additionally, the Austrian citizens recorded a flourishing rate of 27.6% of the citizens, which is the third highest rating country, and as you can see, this is really alarming stuff, and it gets worse. The scale of flourishing continued to drop by around 1 to 5% between the other 20 countries, resulting in some serious problematic results. Scores for Slovakia, for example, came in at 9.9% of flourishing citizens. Russian citizens scored 9.4% of flourishing citizens, and the citizens in Portugal, being at the bottom of the scale, came in at 9.3% of the citizens in that country flourishing. Meaning over 90% of the citizens in all of these countries are suffering from depression or anxiety or some other type of mental disorder. So as you can see, things really aren't good in Europe or across Europe. I suppose we could say we can count our lucky stars that we don't live in those countries, and here in Australia things are much better. And you would be right that things are better here. However, that doesn't mean things are good for everyone. In fact, in Australia, well-being is also a topic of concern, with results from the National Survey of Mental Health and Wellbeing presented through the Australian Bureau of Statistics in 2007, showing that almost half of the Australian population aged between 16 to 85 years, that's 7.3 million people, have experienced a mental disorder, either depressive or affective, at some point in their life. And that's almost 50% of Aussies. Furthermore, 1 in 5 Australians aged 16 to 85 years had been diagnosed with a mental disorder in 2007. Moreover, the National Survey of Mental Health and Wellbeing also showed that around 1 in 4 Australian youth are at risk of developing a mental disorder. That's 26% of young Australian people aged 16 to 24 years. And if we have a look at some other Australian studies to see what's going on, to see if we're getting the same results, we can see a very similar thing. For example, in 2013, Venning surveyed a sample of 3,913 South Australian adolescents aged 13 to 17 years concerning their life satisfaction, psychological well-being, and levels of depression and anxiety. The results showed that 17% of the adolescents smoked cigarettes, 42% of them had consumed alcohol, 67% slept less than 8 hours per night, and 26% had experienced clinically significant symptoms of depression, anxiety, and stress, which equates to 1 in 4 teenagers. Overall, results of this study indicated that less than 50% of adolescents were flourishing, with more than half of them engaging in various types of health risk behaviours, such as smoking, consuming alcohol, not getting enough sleep, and these things are associated with poor mental health. Looking at more of the same, we see an association between unhealthy behaviour and mental health was also reported by Lavelle and company in 2015, who surveyed 751 Australian university students using various depression, anxiety and stress scales, as well as a health behaviour questionnaire, and their results showed that over 1/3 of the students reported mild to severe mental illness symptoms. Results further showed that skipping breakfast and poor sleep quality were associated with depressive symptoms in males, while inadequate, vigorous physical activity and poor sleep quality correlated with stress symptoms in females. And there was another study by Gunthrop and Lyons in 2004 that revealed mental illness, sleeping problems and stress were all associated with feelings of time pressure, which may lead to lower levels of life satisfaction. And when we compare Australia with the rest of the world, in 2008 the World Health Organization estimated that in Australia neuropsychiatric disorders contributed to 29% of the global burden of disease. Additionally, the suicide rate for Australian females is recorded to be 4.4 per 100,000 of the population, while the Australian male suicide rate is 16.7 per 100,000 of the Australian population. And in 2007 to 2008, 1.4 million Australians needed to be treated for a mental illness. So there you have it, and the truth is shocking. And as this research indicates, globally we need to fix this problem and improve the well-being of humanity. According to experts such as Martin Seligman, the father of positive psychology, the ineffectiveness of interventions to improve mental health and well-being demonstrate how difficult the task of applying positive psychology has become for enhancing well-being at the population level. He also goes on to say that he hopes that governments are encouraged to develop more effective strategies to promote flourishing among children within schooling systems, and this is also within childcare systems. And of course, in order for the government to step up and provide the financial packages that are needed to sustain the implementation of continued access to programs to improve well-being, we as the people need to lobby the government to make sure that's going to happen. As you know, at the moment, when it comes to developing programs for education, the task falls mainly on the educators. Moreover, it's often the personal ability of the educator that will indicate how well the program meets with the criteria of effectively maintaining or improving children's well-being. That is, it's up to you as the teacher to create a program for developing a child's well-being, and you need to be a great teacher for that program to be successful. Moreover, as educators of children aged 3 to 6 years, your task is to set the foundation for positive learning outcomes for children through establishing a positive disposition within the child under your care. And for this reason, becoming a kindergarten guru that actually practices mindfulness and meditation themselves is an essential part of this journey. So keep up your daily practice with simple things like brushing your teeth mindfully, taking a shower mindfully, and also continuing with a commitment to practice sitting mindfulness sessions and gratitude and loving kindness meditations. And if you're committed to keeping up these practices, you'll find your own well-being has improved And this will also create rippling effects within your own families and close relationships. Okay, so as you can see from the state of wellbeing across nations and also here in Australia, it really is so important to implement wellbeing programs into childcare centres on a continuous basis. As you know, I've developed the 10-week mindfulness-based creative play program to make the process a little easier for you, and that incorporates both mindfulness training and the early years learning framework. Additionally, I've begun to also provide short courses and resources and opportunities to involve parents in teaching their own children the art of mindfulness. And I'm also determined to continue to create more mindfulness-based creative play programs to help you deliver quality research-based programs for developing flourishing within our children. Because I know that you really do have a huge task on your hands as childcare teachers. And that's just my way of trying to make your job a little bit easier. However, as you know, it's up to you as the teacher to deliver those programs effectively in a way that promotes a love for the practice of mindfulness and meditation. And as such, this is why it's so important that you yourself maintain your own practice and remember to keep the activities that you're teaching to children as fun as possible and delivered in a way that promotes mastery, thereby enhancing a child's self-esteem in the process. Okay, so that's the end of this lecture. I've also included a short quiz to consolidate your learning, and as always I've included some quality additional support materials. So I hope you do get around to looking into all the additional support material that I've been providing, because it really does enhance your learning and helps you to get the most out of the course. And I will meet you in the next lecture.